Now, if the idea of dating again after losing your life partner feels overwhelming, lonely, or just not made for you, this episode might change everything. Welcome back to the Love Machine podcast. And today's conversation is one of the most moving and important we've ever had because we're talking about love after loss and what dating can look like when life takes an unexpected turn. And I am joined by Nicky Wake, a tech entrepreneur who lost her husband and soulmate in 2020, and who bravely stepped back into the dating world only to discover that mainstream dating apps simply were not built for widows or widowers. Instead of connection, she found confusion, isolation, and a sense of being completely misunderstood. And here is something that will really stop you in your tracks. In the UK alone, there are over 2 million widows and widowers, yet almost none of the dating industry is designed with their emotional reality in mind. And that gap is exactly why Nikki created Chapter 2, a safe, supportive community built by widows, for widows and widowers, where grief is respected and hope is gently encouraged. So in this episode, we're going to talk about that fear of dating again, the guilt people often feel for wanting companionship, and why finding someone who truly understands loss can make all the difference. This is not about replacing what was lost. It's about honouring the past while opening the door to connection, comfort, and joy in your next chapter. So if you or someone that you love has ever wondered whether love is still possible after loss, you need to listen to this episode right now. Nikki, how are you doing?
I'm really well. Thanks for having me.
I'm really pleased to have you. You've got quite the story here, haven't you? The backstory.
I do indeed, yes. And yeah, spoiler alert, it's not got well. It now has a happy ending, but there's some tough times in it, definitely.
Of course there are. No, I've coached many widows over the years, and I know the difficulties, I know the problems, I know the successes that there can be overall. But we're going to start with this sort of negative side of this. Of course, this happened because you lost your partner. We have to touch upon it. Unfortunately, it is your backstory. So
It
can you
is.
tell me a bit more about that and how that you started Chapter 2? That would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could talk about Andy forever. So Andy was my soulmate. We met in 2002. We actually met online. We were early adopters of technology. That was back before the days of swiping. And when you
I
used to
remember.
lie, when you used to lie and say you met at a bar. So yeah, head over heels, whirlwind romance. 12 months later, stood on a beach in Jamaica getting married. I was the happiest girl in the world. We had a very, very happy, solid, loving marriage. And we had a little boy, Finn, who at this point in time, by the time Andy fell ill, Finn was 11. And we were the perfect little family. And Andy started complaining of chest pains, and I took him to the doctors because men don't go to the doctors, do they? And the doctor diagnosed stress. Well, Andy was the most laid-back man in the world. He couldn't spell the word stress at MV stress, so I knew something wasn't right. Long story short, we did an ECG. He was having a heart attack. He was rushed into ICU, had some stents fitted, was discharged and came home. And we were toasting a lucky escape. And then at 6 o'clock the next morning, the stents failed. He had another catastrophic heart attack, which resulted, while I was doing CPR, he didn't get enough oxygen to his brain. So that resulted in a terrible brain injury, leaving him profoundly and utterly disabled. He was in that sort of almost vegetative state for 3 years in a very specialist nursing home. My life was in limbo. It was the dreadful and the darkest of times. And then he died of COVID in 2020, and my life was in tatters. I used to wake up incredulous that this was my life. Eventually, in time, and with the help of the widow community, I started to rebuild my life and realized that I needed to try and navigate a way forward. As widows, we never move on, but we move forward. And so I knew that online dating worked. So I thought, I'll have another go at that. So I downloaded this new modern fangled thing called Tinder. And as I'm sure many of your listeners know, Tinder is like the Wild West. And it was full of dick pics and ghosting and married men. And I was a vulnerable widow and wrestling with all those complex emotions of guilt and shame. And like I was loving someone when I was already in a relationship. The challenges of dating as a widow. And I thought, God, there's got to be a better way. I thought, well, what I need is a widower. I need someone who understands, ideally one who looks a bit like George Clooney, but I'd settle for less. And so I thought, well, there must be an app for widows and widowers. It's such a common problem. There are 3.12 million widows in the UK, 15 million in the US. And I thought, what, that must be there. And I looked and there wasn't. And I'm an entrepreneur. So I smelt an opportunity. And I also smelt an opportunity to turn my pain into purpose and to do something kind of positive with my loss. And gave me somewhere to channel that grief. And so I launched Chapter 2 Dating.app in September 2022. We've now got 25,000 users across 4 countries, UK, US, Canada, and Australia. We've created, I think, last memory, 6 marriages, hundreds of relationships, and even a Chapter 2 baby. Now, I thought us Chapter 2ers were a bit beyond babies, but we have some younger members, sadly, they were widowed very young, who met each other online in the early days of Chapter 2 and now have a beautiful baby boy. So yeah, I'm spreading a little joy and happiness and proving to people that life after loss can go on.
And what a great way to honour Andy as well, to have his
I
legacy
hope so.
celebrated.
Yeah, I'd hope that he's looking down on me and feeling proud. He's probably not that proud of me sharing our story in the Daily Mail and various other newspapers, but it's a story of, hope and joy after loss.
Can I ask you a question about that? The question is this, and maybe it's something that people who aren't widowed can prepare for this in the future, because at some point, the sad thing about any relationship or marriage, if it's long term, one of you is going to leave the other, whatever happens.
Yeah, you're either going to die or be widowed. There isn't really a happy ending there, is there?
There's not, but that's not what I want to focus on. But well, it sort of is. But I always want to think about moving on and what you can do. Now, did he at any point say to you that I'll give you my blessing to go and find somebody else?
He did, and we had that conversation because a friend of his died very suddenly, and his widow did start dating again. There's never a right or wrong way to do this, but to what some people may be considered too soon or quite quickly. And he said to me, "You have my utmost blessing. If anything ever happens, that you should move." And he used the term "move on." I prefer the term "move forward." And I reiterated that back to him. So yes, I do feel that I have his blessing. That didn't make the reality of that first kiss with somebody you feel any less strange or any different. But I suppose in some ways I am glad that we had that conversation, and people should have those conversations. There are many difficult conversations we should have before death.
That's my point. I think it's important, if you're in a long-term relationship, to prepare the other for that, rather than be a complete shock and think, well, what do I do now? And always be haunted by the fact, oh, are they gonna jump out on me in my dreams, or might they punish me for this? It's gonna be horrible, because guilt is a major issue with this. And so, but this is all about empowering people. So I want to touch upon guilt very quickly. And because you mentioned it yourself, I didn't really want to cover this, but I think it is important. How do you deal with the guilt of moving on and just, like you say, kissing somebody else? It must be really, really hard.
It is a challenge, and I think honesty is very important in that setting. I mean, that is why I genuinely believe that a widow dating a widower is much easier to understand. I have found a new partner through one of my websites. So I have a naughty sister site called Widow's Fire, which is a hookup app for widows and widowers. And I met my current partner, who's actually now my Chapter 2, on Widow's Fire. And we found it. He understood. He understood how I was feeling and how guilty I felt about the idea of falling in love again. But I kind of I like it to, when you have 2 children. So I've only got one child. I mean, or if anyone who's got more than one, quite frankly. But when you have 2 children, apparently you don't love the first one any less, do you? Because you have that second child. And I think it's like that, that the heart has, an unending capacity for love. And love doesn't stop when someone dies. It continues on. So I had this beautiful phrase that, grief is love with nowhere to go. And I think that's a gorgeous phrase and sums up it perfectly. And so you are allowed and permitted to love multiple people at different stages in your life, and that's a natural thing. So honesty and talking about it. So if you are dating someone who isn't a widow when you are widowed, you need to be very clear about how challenging that is for you, so they can understand. If they're a fellow widow or widower, they will have an insight that no other does. And yeah, honesty, good clear communication, and taking it at the right pace for you. Don't rush in headlong to something. Be very cautious with your heart. I think as widows and widowers, and I've been guilty of this, you think that the next person you meet is your, you know, your new love, and you go head over heels into something, and because all you want to do is feel better and fill that void. And sometimes you're not thinking clearly or making good decisions. And I think that's very important, is be very gentle with your heart and take things very carefully and cautiously, because all too quickly you can be trying to replace a love that you've lost, which that will probably never be replaced. You will love differently the second time. And almost, if you do go headlong into something and it goes terribly wrong, you get sort of secondary grief or secondary loss. So the initial loss impacts even harder as a result of that. And we've seen that happen, you know, many times. And I urge my chapter twoers and my widows fires people to proceed with caution and be mindful of the emotions of everybody involved.
I definitely agree. Take your time. There is no rush for anything. The other person will be understanding about that. If they're not, it's not the right person anyway.
Yeah.
Go into it. Some people, some of my clients, they knew that they've been widowed. Maybe their partner's been ill for a very long time.
Yes.
And they couldn't wait to get back into, so we say, dating and maybe onto your widow's fire type site in that situation. And others, it was much more of a shock and it was harder to deal with. But
indeed, it very much depends on the loss. There's no easy way to lose somebody. I lost Andy after a protracted time, so I had a long time to wrap my head around the fact he was never getting better and never recovering. And therefore I dated a lot quicker, perhaps, than someone whose husband just drops dead, you know, out of nowhere. And they have that shock moment. So yeah, it's different in different cases. And there is no right and wrong answer. When it feels right for you, it's the time to do that.
Definitely agree with that. My own grandma, she was probably around your age and lost my granddad. I only met him when I was very, very young. And I was a baby. I didn't actually meet him as a baby. And then she, within about a year, her childhood sweetheart got in touch with her.
Oh.
And then she remarried another year after that. Because there was always something there, and they got together, and they were just companions, if nothing else, going forward. They loved each other. Both lived to 102. So the important thing is, I think the important thing is, I want to stress, is that you mentioned that sometimes widows can be older, can be younger. You know how long you're going to have left? Could be another 50 odd years, couldn't it? Potentially. And some of my clients are in their 30s and sadly lost their partners. So life can't stop forever. There is a point where you're going to think, I want some new adventures. And part of that probably is speaking, if you've got children, speaking to your children. How did you handle that?
Yeah, so I had 11-year-old when his daddy fell ill, and then he was 14 by the time, so he was ready. He was old enough to understand the complexities of relationships, and I was just very open and honest and transparent, and said that I was too young to spend the rest of my life alone, and that daddy wouldn't want me to spend the rest of my life alone. I've been very, very mindful about who I date and not trying to blend a family. So my new partner has 2 teenage children, and our teenage children know each other and hang out together, but we've kind of made a very clear decision that we're not going to blend those families by moving in together, because I think that's a lot of complex emotions and situations for teenagers in the midst of exams and everything else to be going through. But each new couple needs to make those right decisions for themselves. I have other friends, both of which have very young children, sort of in their 5, 6, 7s, 8s, And there's so many of them, and it's so complex to try and see each other with the kids that actually moving in together was the easiest option. So there's no right or wrong way, is there? I think, like anything, anything to do with relationships, honesty, transparency, and good, clear conversation is key to making any situation work.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of the app itself, what makes it different from, say, Tinder and Bumble and all the other apps like that?
I think the primary thing that makes it different is that we ask people to verify their widowed status. So when you apply, you have to give a link to an obituary or attach in your application a photograph of a death certificate. You need to give us the name of your late partner and the date of loss. And we verify as much as we can within reason. I mean, obviously, we've had incidents where people have tried to fake an obituary, for example. Unfortunately, online dating is targeted by scammers, and some of them are incredibly sophisticated. So we give regular safety advice to all of our members to be very careful and not to share their details till they feel comfortable, to meet in public places, all the usual safety dating advice. But yeah, we verify people's widow status. So you can't join if you're divorced. We want widows to feel very comfortable that they're dating other widows and widowers. The whole point of the site is you don't need to ask someone what their status is, because you know that they're widowed and they've been verified.
That's both terrible and amazing at the same time, really, isn't it?
It's a headache to do, but we do it for a reason.
And I've always said that I think dating apps should verify people properly and work out who they are. And we can't do criminal checks in this country. We can't do certain checks, but it's so important. I always thought it would be great to have an app that everyone is properly verified beyond just photo recognition and videos. It could be anybody, couldn't it? And you are checking their marital status, which is great. And that's the most important thing. And you touched upon scammers there. And that was one of my questions I wanted to ask you. I see this sometimes quite a lot. There's lots of fake profiles out there, people that are conning people, because where we've got widows, lonely people perhaps initially, and they've maybe got some money, targets by scammers all the time, any sort of site. So any top tips for anyone listening right now, whether they're widowed or not, how to spot the scammers?
Yeah, I mean, very easily you can do things like a reverse image search. So you can search somebody's picture to see what it's associated with on the internet. So, that's an easily available and free tool. Obviously to potentially, I quite often ask people for their LinkedIn details, so that I could just verify who they are. Their LinkedIn profile, if you talk about what they do for a job, can I connect with you on LinkedIn? So that, that kind of thing is, that's interesting, so you can Google people that way to sort of verify it and fact check. Always, if you're going to meet somebody, meet them in a public place. Never, ever give you any sensitive information, like your address or your phone, your landline number. Stick things, keep to WhatsApp or whatever till you're 100% safe, and make sure you always meet in a public place and tell friends where you're going.
And never ever give any money to anybody.
Ever. If anybody asks you for money, they're a scammer. And it doesn't matter how good a story or what kind of sub story or anything else. I mean, I'm sort of incredulous that people do, but people do. And people feel sorry for people and think that they're genuine when they're not. So yeah, if anyone ever asks you for money, at that point, end the conversation, block and report them on the site that you're on.
Very much so. Whatever site you're on, do that, please. You're saving somebody else from that sort of problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've seen, you said they are very, very sophisticated. I've seen completely fake websites that have been set up to make someone look genuine. You've probably seen the same. And this goes on, and it's terrible because on a mainstream dating site, so many of the scammers do claim to be widowed, don't they? It's a strange thing. They claim so that initially you feel sorry for them right away, and it makes them feel genuine and lonely, and you're going to want to spend money. So absolutely be very much cautious. And if you aren't sure about it, particularly on chapter 2, I'm sure they can just email in.
They can literally email me. I mean, I ask people to email me. When you're dealing with Tinder, you're not speaking to the head of Tinder. When you sign up for chapter 2, you're talking directly to me. I vet personally every profile myself. And that's the way we ensure that we are a mission-driven business built by widows, for widows and widowers.
How do you have time for that? I used to do
I,
it for a site.
I'm a workaholic, so I like to keep all over things. And actually, we're at the point and the size where we can. I have a small team, but we ensure that I have sight of all the profiles. Obviously, as we scale, we'll need to employ more people.
Yeah, I know another lady who runs a dating site in a similar sort of, not a different niche, but the same way. And she vets every single profile and she
Yeah.
goes through, you probably know her, but it's your episode. And so it's all about this. It's amazing the amount of time that goes into this because I've gone on the back end of a dating site before and I've gone through verifying profiles, checking them out. But now we've got AI now. Anyone
Mhm.
can create these fake videos, you can have fake backgrounds. It's so different now. I think meeting people in real life is something that's very important. Do
It
you
is.
have that element built in?
We always try and suggest that you get to a meet quite quickly. Obviously, wait till you know it's safe, but
Yeah.
then because that way, you can see with the whites of your eyes that it is a genuine person.
Do you do events?
We do, yeah. We have a sister organization called the Widowed Collective, which is a not-for-profit CIC for widows. So we run a series of social events through that aren't dating events specifically. We have run chapter 2 dating events, but the problem I always had was that we'd end up with 20 women and 2 men, because the men were less likely to come out to events. So yeah, I mean, our ratio, sadly, boys die quicker than girls. So, our ratio is about 60% women to 40% men. But on events, that was reflected even higher. Like the women were much more active and social and outgoing than the men were. So yeah, we now just do community events through our sister community not-for-profit company.
That's so good. I think having the odd event is really good. I think I'm getting the impression from chapter 2 and your Widow Collective, it's about community, isn't it?
It is we're very community driven. I know that I always say that the one silver lining to the cloud of being widowed is the widowed community. It's been my backbone of survival through
Mhm.
what's been the most challenging experience of my life because I've made the most incredible friends. My best friend is someone I met through a widow charity, and we now holiday together with our kids all the time. It's that sense of community. I think as widows, we we live for the moment. We know that life can and does change in a heartbeat, and so our friendships are deeper and stronger, I think, than anyone else because we're bonded by this horrible, unique coincidence that happened, and it bonds you on a much deeper level than a normal friendship.
Of course. And it's a horrible thing to go through, but it just
Mm.
proves there's always not necessarily a happy ending, but there's always more fun to be had and different things to happen after that point.
There is. It's a new normal, but it can be a joyous normal. And as widows, we should allow ourselves to find joy and hope again.
Very much so. Now, there were people listening now, maybe, who do know someone that is recently widowed or
Mhm.
been widowed 10 years ago and still hasn't really decided to date again. Or there's those that maybe are sadly widowed and they found this by Googling it and they've come across the episode. So, what advice do you give people who want to get back into dating again? I know taking it slowly is very, very important, but where do they actually begin? What's the
Where do
best
they
way?
begin? Well, they sign up to chapter 2. So you can sign up for free. It's completely free to set up a profile and to browse. So you're not even committing to anything at this stage. All you're doing is putting a profile up there and having a search and see which other widows and widowers are in your area. You can then choose to upgrade to premium to contact people if you want, or you can sit back and wait to see who contacts you. And that's completely free to do, and it's safe and secure. Be as honest as you can in your profile about who you are. Put recent photographs up, um, you know, and start some conversations. The very worst that could happen is you could make some new friends.
Very much so. I think just getting started is the important thing. That's
Yeah,
the hardest thing, isn't it, of
yeah.
all? Just
It's
creating
that
that
it's that big
profile.
leap of putting yourself back out there. But at
Mm.
least with chapter 2, you're in a safe, supportive community that understands.
Very much so. And I believe you've got lots of other niche dating apps, and you've got a company that runs them all, haven't you, as
Yeah,
well?
yeah. So
So yeah.
Chapter Two Ventures, we have three sites. So we've got widowsfire.dating, which is a hookup site for widows and widowers. Widows Fire is a recognized phenomenon we could do a whole episode on that describes what happens when you're in early grief is you ache for physical comfort. So you physically get horny. And we describe it as having an itch to scratch, and that is very much kind of widow's fire, and it's very real and recognized. And so we recognize that people, when they're in the throes of widow's fire, probably aren't ready for chapter two and aren't ready for serious relationships, and therefore we've created this very safe space where people can literally get together for no strings fun and find some physical comfort, and that's what Widow's Fire is. And then we also have another site called soberlove.app, which is a dating app for the sober community who have similar challenges in terms of finding people who with lived experience who understand what they're going through and don't want to have the difficult conversation about being an alcoholic on the first date. You want to date other people who understand that alcohol may be an issue or a problem in life, or you may choose consciously just not to drink, and therefore you don't want to be around people who do.
I imagine those two things can be linked if you do go through a massive life change.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the reason I started Sober Love was because I tried to drown my grief with red wine, which didn't work. And I ended up in rehab. And in rehab, I thought, oh my God, I've got to date as a sober person now. I thought, well, there must be an app for sober people. I looked, couldn't find one. So similar sort of story. So yeah, all of my apps are grounded in my life experience. I'm hoping that I've run out of problems now, so I don't need to launch any new apps.
I was going to ask you what's next.
We're looking at doing Sober Fun, which will be a casual dating site for the sober community who need to get their dopamine hits where they can, potentially. And then I'm looking at maybe a single parent dating app will be our next one, because again, single parents have similar challenges to that of widows. So yeah, the future of dating apps is niche. There's no point trying to take on Tinder or Bumble or Hinge. So yeah, chapter two is a platform that has niche dating apps sat on it. And actually, we can host other people's niche dating apps. So if someone's got an idea for a dating app, if they come to us, we can help you build and host it on a revenue share basis.
Which ideas have you turned down? Have you thought about, I can't possibly do that? There must be one that springs to mind.
Yeah, so someone came to me with an idea about pet owners and dog walking, and I just thought I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that. And yeah, so I need to find an idea that resonates with me, that I think is a niche, but is a niche we can easily target. Because the problem with anyone can have a dating app idea.
Yeah.
The challenge is the budget to market it, and that's kind of where we are. But yeah, I'm open to hearing all ideas. I'll happily explore them.
Sometimes just being really sensational gets the press anyway, gets the attention in the short term. That can work. But there has actually been pet dating apps before. They've existed, but only temporarily. They haven't lasted more than a year or so.
Yeah, and I think that was my reticence around it.
It was. I always thought it would be great to have a service where you can borrow people's dogs for dating photos. But even that apparently exists now to some degree.
Yeah, I suspect it does, definitely. I know you can borrow a doggy quite literally. There's a site.
They're great, but that I thought was a bit fake to have that. We're coming towards the end of the podcast. I want to ask you a question. This is probably more relevant than anything else, but I ask about soulmates. What is your beliefs about soulmates? For someone who's loved and lost and loved again, what do you think? Do they exist? Can you have more than one? Is it
I genuinely think you can have more than one. I described Andy as my soulmate. I was destined to be with him. I was destined to be with him for a period of my life. And I genuinely believe that the person I'm dating now is a different kind of soulmate, but the universe delivered them to me at the right time when I was ready and when my heart and mind were open to that. And this person, I'm a very different woman to the one that married Andy Wake, and would I still be with Andy if he was alive? I genuinely don't know. Maybe we were very different. He was the yin to my yang, and now my latest partner is much more like me. But now I don't need grounding. I needed grounding when I had Andy to settle down and have a child. And now I'm about to go off on life's big adventures of, my son's going off to university. I've got my freedom back. I can go and travel. And my latest partner is of a similar life stage and mindset. So yeah, I genuinely believe you can have multiple soulmates, and that we weren't built as human beings to just love one person for the rest of our lives. I don't know. I think maybe that's an age thing. I believe in, ethical non-monogamy. I believe that people can have multiple partners within a lifetime. Absolutely.
I love that answer. It's completely important, but just to show that we have got the chance of doing this again. And you are such an inspiration to anyone who's going through this or been through this, that you are channeling your powers into good when it could have been used for anything else. You could have gone off the rails completely and stopped all that. And we won't talk about the red wine, but it could have been awful. You're doing this, like myself, you're doing this because you want to help people. And
indeed,
there's nothing more powerful than that. And I want people to be inspired by this, to go out there and try chapter 2. And even Widow's Fire, if you want to go and give that a go.
Indeed, absolutely. There's never a dull moment on there.
No, so if somebody wants to find and download these, I presume they go on the App Store or...
Yeah, well, we're on the App Store, or the best thing to do is just go straight to the website, chapter2dating.app or widowsfire.dating or soberlove.app.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Nikki. Great to talk to you. Really, really interesting story there. So thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
I'm watching. You're very welcome. I'm watching to see what you do next.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, James.
Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to give you a free copy of my latest book, which you can download right now from my website, jamespreece.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could share the love by taking a few seconds to write a positive review on the iTunes store right now. See you next time.